there's a lot of things that aren't going well. And over the weekend, Toronto FC suffering yet again another loss, 2-0. They end up losing. And that prompted their president and CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Keith Pelly, to put out a letter to the fans. And it actually begins with, "We hear you. We understand your frustration." And he's like, "We know you want to return to winning ways at BMO Field." So it's a much longer letter. You can see how he just goes on to talk about, by the way, he does use the word rebuild. Any rebuilding project is challenging, is what he goes on to say. But when you read this letter, Wheels, if you're a TFC fan, does it put your mind at ease at all?
No, it doesn't at all. It came across as being very corporate. This is what big organizations do today. If they sense that there are elements on fire, they'll try to put them out as best as possible. So they'll try to reach out in this kind of generic way to try to calm the waters to a certain degree. And to some people, it works. For some people, that's what they really want. They want that kind or any engagement at all. But most people want to see action. But this is a club that, in fairness, have gone through a lot of action in recent times, but the reaction has been altogether negative. This is the problem. You cannot put everything that's problematic with Toronto FC right now on this current regime, okay? Like, they were saddled with contracts and players and a squad that's quite frankly not good enough. So they've been playing from a deficit. We understand that. But this is 4 years into losing, and there's going to be a reaction from the fans. Let's start off with what the club needs to be able to do here. I think there needs to be definitive action and not just words when it comes to the direction where this is actually going. This season is completely lost. There are so many injuries to a team already not good enough, and a lack of identity amongst the group on the field that there's very little light at the end of the tunnel. What they need to show is that everything that the club does from now until the end of the season is with eyes for rebuilding or being in a much better position come the start of 2026 than now. The club is very thin in terms of the players that are available, and this might have to be done incrementally, but some things that they can do is they need to use buyouts on they need to use their 2 buyouts on players to clear the deck. If you have to play young, unproven players, you're not sure what they're going to be, then do so rather than playing players who you're quite sure what they actually are and that they're not going to be a benefit to this team. They also need a collective identity on the field. I think the coaching staff needs a little bit pressure in terms of the way they're going to play, because give John Herdman and his staff credit last year, I don't think they were very good, but they played within a system and they did that efficiently, where I think they actually maximize what they are. What we're seeing right now is a team that looks like they haven't really played with one another. And also they need to arrange and finalize the Lorenzo Insigne situation. And maybe there's some alignment in what goes on with the Toronto Maple Leafs, them winning, which means more money coming into the organization, which will then afford them the opportunity to cut a big check to make that player go away. Because him being there right now, it's got to be a complete bummer for everyone involved, and they need to fix that situation as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the Bernadeschi situation and the fact that his play has curtailed and fallen off a cliff since that contract extension clicked in last season by picking up that assist in a meaningless game. Now he's a real problem for this club as well, because if you could actually clear the decks and have 3 designated players come in, things can change relatively quickly. Unfortunately, the $20 beers, I don't think that they're going away. They might freeze ticket prices that are already too high. This is a big club, and that's just problematic in terms of the way that they're going to run. So, and the biggest question facing them, sorry, and this rant will be over, I brought it up in the weekend, is Jason Hernandez the right person to make these critical decisions?
Whoa. We're going to get there. Don't jump ahead.
Okay.
Don't jump ahead.
The letter comes across as being a lot bit hollow, not completely recognizing the magnitude of the rebuild that this club needs to undergo right now.
And I wonder if you share that same sentiment, AGR, right? Like, if you are a TFC fan and, you see that letter by Keith Pelly, are you sitting there going, yeah, changes are coming? Or are you like, what is this?
I think we have to remember that fans aren't stupid. You know, they watch these, they come to these games, they follow the team, they followed so often. I'm sure, you know, for years, some of them since the inception of the club. And the reality is, they're not seeing enough action, like Gareth says. And I think the big thing is, you talk about rebuild. You know, the beauty of a parity league in North America is that when you have a couple of stinky years, you know, usually there's mechanisms in place to help you turn it around. Maybe you get a couple high draft picks, of course, less so in MLS, but there's incentives, right? You're not getting relegated. You're not getting thrown out of the league completely. The reality is, they've had multiple bottom two finishes. This year, they look on track for another one. And then you look at the squad. I look at their top 7 minutes, guys. 5 of them are above 30, and some of them are into their mid 30s. They have, of their top 10 minutes, guys, they have 2 who are under 22. It's 22-year-old Kosi Thompson, 22-year-old Theo Corbianu. You can't even look at on the field and be like, oh, at least these are young guys who are going to learn from this. No, this is supposed to be the in prime best version, and this number could have been higher, right? If Richie Larea was fit, some of the others guys weren't injured. So for me, I'd just be really concerned with the lack of action, because ultimately, if you know Keith Pelly's acknowledging there's supposed to be a rebuild, that this team needs to start from the bottom, well, the reality is they haven't done enough to indicate that that's the track that they're on or supposed to be on.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key there. Whenever a letter like this comes out, it's usually accompanied by action. I hate to say it, but usually there's a firing, or to your point, there's a big player buyout or some sort of trade. We know back in 2012, to your point, EGR, the fans aren't just going to drink the Kool-Aid that you're trying to force them to drink, right? There was big protests when ticket sales went up after the team had accomplished nothing, right? At that point, they had not ever made the playoffs in the franchise's existence, and MLSE went and raised the prices. The fans boycotted. They brought them back down. These fans aren't dumb, but there needs to be some sort of change that accompanies a letter like this, or the letter feels hollow, as you said, Wheels. So now we'll get into, as we move forward. Now we know Keith Pelly was just hired in January of 2024. He's not going to be going anywhere. When you look at the history of Jason Hernandez, who's currently the GM, did play a season with Toronto FC, retired in 2019, and right away joined the Toronto FC franchise, first as manager of player engagement. Then he became assistant GM in 2021, and then was elevated to general manager in 2023. So he too, was adopted a lot of contracts and things that were done before him. We get that, but now we're going to try and look ahead here. And do you feel like Hernandez is the right guy to move forward with the next steps that need to be taken here, Wheels?
Where's the evidence that he's ready to fundamentally rebuild this club top to bottom and make the big decisions? The words that are being thrown out, even the letter from Keith Pelly, they're like generic. We're changing our identity. We want players committed to the club and work hard and more athletic. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is the direction that the club is taking? Are they being innovative? Are they just trying to be pragmatic? Because it seems like it's very difficult to execute a rebuild, but also try to go out and make the playoffs like they set out to do this season. Like, that objective of trying to make the playoffs with this group this season seemed like the wrong course of action for a club that needed open heart surgery. So Jason Hernandez, since he's been at the club, like, what signings have he made that you're like, yeah, that really worked out? Prince Owusu, come on. The Cassius Molela, like, what? Henry Wingo, like I think the jury's out on the new players, Dominguez and Bryn Hildson, that they brought in. Like, I'm just wondering, what players are you bringing in for what system? I think Jason is a great guy. I think he's a bright guy. Perhaps he should still be in the role of an assistant general manager, and you could bring in someone that can oversee a massive project. Like, I just look at the front office and the staff that's making decisions right now. It's Keith Pelly, who came from the golf world and the broadcast world, into football. Jason Hernandez, Sean Rubio's the data guy. Like, who else is there right now? It just seems like at once upon a time, Toronto FC was blessed with talent in the front office and their decision makers. And because of that, they were making a lot of great decisions. Now, for whatever reason, whether it's budget, whether it's, I don't know, they haven't invested in that area. So do I feel good about the direction? I feel good the fact that a lot of players are out of contract at the end of the year. That's fine. But who's going to be executing the new signings that are being brought in order to make sure that this club takes a step forward instead of just continues to flail? That's the big question for me.
Yeah, and I know it's not a sexy topic for fans because they want to see the players on the pitch. But to your point there, Wheels, I feel like it's been a few years now, and AGR, you can pick up on this. There's been a real brain drain behind the scenes. Off the pitch, to your point, there has been that brain drain of people who make decisions and have been able to put something great on the field. I always go back, I call it the three-headed monster between Tim Lewicki, Tim Bezbatchenko, Greg Vanney, and then obviously everyone else from Corey Ray to all these people that were, on top of things in the soccer world to help make this team better, working in conjunction. And I think Bill Manning tried to take a lot of that on himself. Everyone else kind of got picked up by other clubs, moved on, didn't replace them. And now here we are. So again, if you're looking at who's the right person to lead them forward, AGR, I mean, are you feeling good about it being Jason Hernandez, or are you feeling way more people need to be brought on board here?
Yeah, it definitely feels like the sporting side could be beefed up just because it just feels like the roster composition is just not being juiced enough. It's not being maximized to its fullest extent. Like you mentioned, when Tim Bezbatchenko was there, TFC was signing the top end guys, but man, they had a heck of a roster from top to bottom, and it feels like no coincidence. You look at Columbus, and they're just one of the deepest rosters in the league. They've gone out and just found these guys, and they haven't all been sexy signings. Some of them have been depth guys in other MLS teams. Heck, their coach was technically just another MLS guy who had only had one job up to that point. But man, it felt like every decision they make has been bang on. It feels like for this TFC side, with Jason, if it is going to be Jason Hernandez, or if it's going to be someone else, or if they're going to beef up the sporting side, I just look at this roster and think, man, like what's the plan, right? What's the plan? Even bringing in guys like Maxime Dominguez, he's 29. If you're in a rebuild and you're looking at being good in 27, he's going to be 31. What was the point of bringing him in now? I think they just need to. Maybe a group of guys who know the league. Another thing you look at is teams are signing more U22s than ever. They're signing more younger players. You look at TFC, the U22 initiative, they've failed to use it. They've just straight up failed to use it. That initiative is fueling the Whitecaps right now. It's fueled Columbus. It's fueled LAFC, and Toronto FC's just straight up ignored it. So I think it definitely look at the sporting side, and they need to find ways to extract more value out of this team.
Just really quickly to that point, they have about 5 right backs. They have they have like a million center backs who are all international. Why are you spending international spots on center backs? If you're a Canadian club, you have like 1 left back who's not good enough. They have no athleticism in the midfield, no athletic number 8 going forward. Do you want to play with a 10? They sign a striker in Brent Hildson. All the data shows all of his production came playing in a front 2. And now they sign him as an isolated number 9 with 2 wing players. How are you going to play? Like, it's like they built Frankenstein here with a bunch of parts that nobody wants. It's just wild to me.
And they never replaced Michael Bradley either in the middle of the park.
Give me a call. Maybe I can help. I don't know. It's just, I look at this project right now and look, like the club might brush, some of the dissent and some of their failures in attendance and other things on the Apple TV deal. You can't blame it on that. They'll blame it on it's hard to get to the stadium, kickoff times, competitive marketplace, pricing. There's all these little incremental things that have kind of led them to this point. Now it's a time where they need to be innovated. Some wholesale changes need to be made, like in the way that you price your team, the ticket. If I'm there and season ticket holders are livid over price increases of their ticket, and they look and they're like, I'm paying $21 for a beer. Like, you might be able to get away with that down at the hockey rink. You're doing it here at BMO Field. It's nuts, Andy. And I think it's going to be sobering. MLSE might be able to brush it off next Wednesday night if the Leafs don't sweep the Florida Panthers. The Toronto FC plays at home on the same night on a Wednesday. What would there be, 5,000, 6,000 people in the stands? Like, it's soul-searching time. It's not the time for letters. It's the time for deep open heart surgery here in order to get this thing on track.
Yeah, that's why people try to bring in big purses, because they're trying to smuggle in snacks and drinks so they can afford them.
So expensive. It's like,
let's talk about Canada Soccer for a little bit, because they did announce that they're going to be hiring a sporting director role to oversee obviously the national teams, the programs, just all of soccer in this country. And I know, Wheels, that you've been calling for this, saying that it's such a crucial role. So, what do you make of them, looking for a sporting director position here to put in place? And given that entire rant on TFC, will you be submitting a resume?
Huh. Kevin Blue can pick up the phone and give me a call. I think I've been saying this for years, that Canada Soccer, like decades, needed a sporting director. They needed a competition committee. They need someone to have their eye on the prize, which is the performance of our national teams all the way down, and creating pathways for players and coaches. And the fact that this job is finally being looked at in terms of a hire, I think this is great news for Canadian soccer. And like I said, well overdue. Now it turns to who's going to make the decision and who may be the proper candidates. Clearly, this isn't an area of Kevin Blue's expertise. He will be outsourcing kind of maybe the job search there, whether it be former players again. I'm sure Angus McNabb, Ron Waxman, Jesse Marsh, these individuals may be part of this as well. And I'm really curious whether they'll prioritize a Canadian candidate or not. I think that a Canadian candidate, maybe a former national team player, would be a preference. The name that I immediately land on is perhaps a Julian de Guzman. He's with the Red Bull right now. There's a Red Bull connection with Jesse Marsh. He's a former national team player. He worked with Ottawa Fury in the former days. He's a bright, up-and-coming individual in the game. He's a name that comes to mind. A player that I played formerly during my university days, Nicky Budelich, was part of the Inter Miami setup before the Messi show kind of took over. He's an interesting name. I'm sure Angus McNabb will throw his name in the hat. So it's something to keep an eye on. In an ideal world, someone like Axel Schuster would be perfect for this job, but I'm sure that he doesn't want to take the pay cut to do something like this. So it's about time, but what kind of candidate they land on, I think there'll be a lot of interest in who that may be.
Yeah. AGR?
Yeah, this just feels like the last step of kind of finalizing what's all the change that's gone on. And entering this year, you got, 2 new national team coaches. Kevin Blue's obviously now, been on the job for approximately 14 months. And that's obviously been a big plus. He's come in and has steadied steadied the ship, so to speak, in what were some very murky and unsteady waters when he arrived. So I think just, the big thing, like Wheels mentions, is what's the profile? Is this maybe a job where, because there's been a lot of outside influence, which has been positive? Is this one where you maybe bring in a Canadian to kind of round out that circle of thought? But ultimately, I think just having another footballing mind will be huge, because one thing that has stood out is someone like Jesse Marsh has had to do maybe a little more than he should. Kevin Blue has had to do more than he should. And ultimately, with the World Cup next year, should just be focusing on that and having someone who can come in and help with a lot of those little details, such as, what's the sporting plan? Should Jesse Marsh have a great World Cup and there's a reality where he leaves? What's the succession look like? Just a lot of footballing decisions, because the reality is under John Herdman, a lot, just kind of ended up falling under the plates of one person. And as we saw, when that person leaves, it can be disaster. Just having that sort of long-term planning will be
and beyond that, this has always been part of the national team managers' profiles, and it's just too big of a job. It was too big of an ask. So they kind of pushed those profiles to the side, and then nothing got done. And that's where we are today. This is a full-time job. Gooch Onwayu does the job in the United States. I think this is an area where you could actually bring in potentially someone from abroad. You can make an argument that bringing maybe an outside voice and then hiring Canadian coaches might be the long-term plan here for our national teams and sorting that out. But it's certainly something to watch. But it's about who that's going to be making this decision for me that is drawing the most interest.